Amory, thank you very much. It was terrific. It's been a terrific day and a half. Been taking notes nonstop. So I have a problem that has to do, I'm working kind of the last chapter of my book already. And it's how to balance fear and hope around this issue. You touched on it at the end of your talk. I find, you know, when you talk to people and you say, look, you just don't understand the scale of this problem. No one's really talking about the scale of the problem. The attitude is, well, if it's that big, what the hell, let's party, okay? I can't possibly solve it. But if you say, well, let's not talk about the scale. Let's march forward. It's not that urgent. People say, well, if it's not that urgent, let's party. How do I balance this out? You and I are kind of that balance. I'm a little more fear, you're a little more hope, you know. And what is the right place for our political leaders to be right now?
Leading fearlessly. You quoted Dana Meadows as always seeing the glass as half full. Well, I don't see it as half full or half empty. Having kind of an engineering mentality, I see it as having 100% design margin expandable by efficiency. And my old mentor, Dave Brower, said that optimism and pessimism are different sides of the same irresponsible, simplistic surrender to fatalism. Treating the future as fate, not choice, and not taking responsibility for creating the world we want. David Orr, our trustee from Oberlin College, had a wonderful remark a few days ago to the effect that optimism has its feet up on the table and a satisfied smirk knowing the deck is stacked. Hope has its sleeves rolled up and is working hard to change the odds. So I think all of our work aligns very clearly with hope. And of course, we strive our utmost in the expectation that the skills that have brought our species to this stage, 3.8 billion years into evolution, may enable us to solve the problems we've created. Because after all, these problems are a mix of billions of individual choices. Whenever we choose to use energy in a particular way, that shows up as part of a huge aggregate energy demand, enormous carbon emissions. Well, it only takes a lot of little decisions, smarter decisions of the same kind, better informed, to turn that right around. And just to show you how little effort it takes, economic theorists normally assume that energy intensity, energy per dollar GDP in the world, is going to decline only 1% a year, because that's what it has done historically when no one paid attention. If it went down 2% a year, that would balance the economic and population growth, and carbon emissions would stabilize. If it went down about 3% a year, carbon emissions would fall and the climate would stabilize pretty quickly, to the extent irreversible changes aren't already in train. Well, could we do 3% a year? Certainly, we already do. The US last year cut its energy intensity 4% a year, slightly reducing total energy use. California is normally 1 percentage point faster than the rest of the country. They've long had a better policy framework. China is 1 percentage point faster than that for over 25 years. Over 5% a year energy intensity reduction for 20 years. Almost 8% for the next 5 years. Then they fell off the rails. Now they're getting back on again. Attentive companies like Ray's cut energy intensity, even absolute greenhouse gas emissions, in his case, around 8% a year, as I recall. Some closer to 9. I think he's actually nearly 9 over the last decade. Well, so to stabilize climate, we need to reduce carbon emissions 2 or 3 times faster than attentive companies routinely do at a huge profit. What's so hard about that? We need to pay attention.
I like that point, paying attention. I'm going to China in a couple weeks. What should I've got to give a talk there to the China Green Car Conference in Tianjin, which itself seems to me quite an unusual thing. When they invited me, I thought I can't resist. A China Green Car Conference. Now, whenever I've, in the past, been asked to speak there, some usually young person stands up and says, well, you know, Mr. Friedman, you got to go green. You Americans got to grow dirty for the Industrial Revolution. And so don't lecture us. It's our turn now. And my answer...
The same dumb mistakes you made?
Right? Well, that's one good answer. Part of my answer lately has been, you don't want to go green now? Make my day. Because I need about 5 years. With the Rocky Mountain Institute, we will invent every new green technology. You'll have to import them all for us. So take your time. Give me about 5 years. And that usually gets their attention, you know.
Yeah, in fact, I had a well-informed friend in Detroit whom I asked a few years ago how long it would take before you'd drive back from Walmart with your new Wally made by Shanghai Automotive and using very little oil and ultimately no oil. He said, about 10 years. That's tomorrow in the car business.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So what else would you tell the Chinese now?
Well, let me tell you what I told a group of Chinese leaders when I got to give the concluding address for Orville Schell's U.S.-China Climate Summit last year. And I think they were rather surprised. They'd never heard this before from a Westerner. I said, look, your culture is 5 millennia older than mine. You have 5 times as many brains as we do, quite possibly better ones. About 90% of the technologies that underlay the Western Industrial Revolution were invented in China.
You know what Bill Gates always says to me about China and brains? You know, in China, when you're 1 in a million, there are 1,300 other people just like you.
Right. My grad students at Peking University were 1 in 30,000 of Chinese college entrants. I picked up on that real fast. Okay, so in addition, I said, you're the only country to have cut energy intensity over 5% a year for over 25 years. You're the only country to have energy efficiency as your top strategic priority for national development, because you know you can't afford to develop otherwise. Now, to be sure, you're at an early stage of implementation. Policy is immature and evolving. The mountains are high. The emperor is far away. Bad stuff goes on at the perimeter. But you're figuring out how to do that. You're more highly motivated. You have a better policy framework than we do. You have better paramount leaders than we do, and you work harder. So for all these reasons, I think we can rely on China to lead the world out of the climate mess.
Lay down a challenge to him.
Well, and express the potential for China leading the world in the direction we all need to go, and they understand that. You know, a friend of mine, Bill Browning here, had quite a time with Wan Jiabao before he became premier and asked what he was going to do about energy. And the answer he got was basically perfect. He got it. And the emphasis would be on a modern gas infrastructure, renewables, a few other things, and above all, much, much, much more efficient use of energy everywhere.
Before I go to China, Amory, for my sins, I have to go to Iraq next week. And what would you, not say to Iraqis, but what would you, when you think about the Middle East, when you think about the Middle East, though, and you think about this really oil-intensive region that's so oil-dependent for its economies and growth, what do you think's going to happen to that part of the world if RMI succeeds in its vision?
Well, some of our oil exporting friends will have to get real jobs, and will have to get a real education and use their talents really productively. I think an interesting example you know, the first Arab OPEC country to run short on oil, Bahrain, is the most developed, the most democratic, the most pluralistic, and exactly as you've written in detail, you know the region infinitely better than I do, the most autarkic, corrupt regimes have the most oil revenue, the least incentive to change, the most ability to buy off social change to protect their own position. And I've had a lot of conversations with oil exporters around the world, people from the Gulf, from Russia, from Mexico, from Venezuela, about, gee, what would the oil endgame mean for us? And on the whole, those who have a longer sweep view of history say this would be really good for our society. We would have to start building a real polity and a real economy sooner.
I have a saying about Russia. You know, you tell me the price of oil, and I'll tell you what kind of Russia you'll have. At $70, it'll be Nigeria. At $35, it'll be Norway. At $10, it'll be America.
Yeah. Well, you know, Putin and Ahmadinejad and what's his name in Sudan and Chavez are, in essence, you know,
yeah.
we empowered them. We created them in a way.
What, if there were a green debate, a lot of people have been talking about having actually one debate just devoted to green. And when you consider that in the last election cycle, there was only one question in all three presidential debates.
Very limited one at that.
And a very limited one at that on energy and environment. So there's a green debate, or even if there's just a debate, and you got to ask one question to the Democratic and Republican presidential nominees, what would it be?
I think the most interesting one, because it would tend to expose differences between rhetoric and belief, would be how would you feel about desubsidizing the entire energy sector so everything could compete on merit at honest prices?
Well, that's good.
Because, you know, most of the foolish stuff we've got that has gotten us into this mess was bought because we leveraged private sector money into stupid places that wouldn't have gone otherwise by subsidizing them more than other stuff.
Yeah, very good.
And, you know, energy policy is not based on rationality. It's exactly as you said. It's based on lobbying, campaign contributions. It's basically corrupt practices. And this also, of course, gets us into the position where we have to, or feel we have to discover empirically, you know, is Iraq going to be Singapore on the Euphrates or Yugoslavia with oil? Well, now we know.
Amory, just to close, you're how old?
I'll be 60 in November.
60. I'm 54. So at the 50th anniversary, I'll be 79, you'll be 85. When they wheel us out here for the stage.
When we bound out on the stage, invigorated by all the colleagues who wind up our key every morning.
What RMI will you be describing in 25 years? What will RMI look like in 25 years, and what will be its biggest challenges?
We're going to say that in more detail in the next newsletter, actually.
Give us a hint.
But I think we will be able to look back on still a lot to do, but having passed the major critical tipping points. And we're already seeing incredibly rapid progress. The oil endgame implementation made possible by Adams Challenge Grant, for example, enabled us to tackle 6 sectors: cars, trucks, planes, military, fuels, and finance. And I'd say we're already past the hard part with 3 of them, that is planes, trucks, and military, the trucks part thanks to Walmart's leadership. And we'll look back in a year or two and know whether we passed the tipping point in cars this year. We have 2 transformational car projects going on, one at an automaker level, one with a consortium of Tier 1 suppliers. either one could flip the industry, and they're both coming up trumps. So,
by the way, what kind of car will you be driving here in 25 years? And how will it be fueled?
it will be an ultralight, very aerodynamic hybrid, and my guess is it will be a fuel cell car. It might be a battery electric car. Failing those, it would be a plug-in hybrid. And the fuel component, if it's a plug-in hybrid, would be sustainable biofuel. So I will be using zero oil one way or another, and I think so will pretty much all the rest of us, because we're in the relatively early adopter segment. But I think 25 years from now, we'll be able to say that the last heavy steel car factory already closed, the last coal and nuclear plants just closed. I'm going to turn them into an industrial museum or something like that. You know, I'm having this burst of sort of pre-nostalgia just thinking about it, because you know, these are technologies like steam engines. They served us very well until something better came along, and then they became obsolete, and then after a while they become industrial museums. And the climate problem, which is 2/5 from burning oil, 2/5 from fueling power plants, well, we have very profitable solutions to both halves of that. Winning the oil endgame shows how to get completely off oil by the 2040s, led by business for profit. You save half the oil for 12 bucks a barrel. You replace the other half with saved natural gas and advanced biofuels for 18 bucks a barrel. Average cost 15 bucks a barrel. So it's, you know, about 1/5 the price we're paying today. And for electricity, you can save 3/4 of it cheaper than running a coal or nuclear plant that costs nothing to build. And for the rest of it, micropower already has 1/3 of the world market share in new electricity, 1/6 of the total supply. This is not a very difficult problem, except institutionally. But I think one of the big lessons we'll be able to look back on is that public policy played catch-up, and that we should be grateful for all those who labored in Washington and other capitals trying to change the rules. But really what mattered most was that business, in coevolution with civil society, came up with innovative competitive strategies, technologies, and design integration that were much more powerful than public policy. They enabled the business logic to play itself out, and then outfits like RMI came along with institutional acupuncture, figuring out where the business logic was congested and not flowing properly, sticking needles in it, getting it flowing, and with astonishing speed, the market system actually started to work properly.
You know, Amory, I know you don't like to be called an optimist per se, but there's an old saying that optimists are usually wrong. Pessimists are usually right. But all the great change in history was done by optimists. So thank you for what you do. Thank you all for joining us here tonight, and I look forward to 25 years.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amory. Thank you.